examination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed analysis. We have a couple of articles important for international relations and one article which is very important for health and science and technology. So these articles are extremely important for the mains exam, and we can also get few pointers which can be very important for our prelims as well. Plus we have few smaller articles which are exclusively relevant for the prelims. So let's take up a detailed discussion of the newspaper so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking the initiative, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start, we have a couple of very important announcements. As part of the last lap series, where we are helping 2024 aspirants to revise all the topics in the last minute, we are conducting 2 sessions today and tomorrow. Sarmad Mehraj sir shall be discussing all the important articles in the Indian Constitution today at 7 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. So this session shall take place today, and tomorrow on the 14th of June at 7 p.m. Sarmad sir will discuss the important constitutional amendments which could be very relevant for the upcoming prelims. So if you are preparing for the exam on 16th of June or even 2025 aspirants, these sessions would be extremely useful for you because in one short video you can cover all the important articles and constitutional amendments. So do attend these sessions without fail. And also remember that our online classroom program has been running full-fledged, and the new batches in English and in bilingual have recently started. So would you wish to enroll for these classes? We have a special offer going on. You can take up a 15-month subscription at just around 30,000 rupees. So this is a comprehensive course covering GS, CSAT, test series, etc. And if you're interested, you can contact the number provided on the screen. And also remember, after prelims, we shall be starting our optional courses as well. In English, for example, Abhishek sir will be taking up history and Mukesh sir will be starting with geography classes immediately after prelims. So this is something you need to keep in mind as well. So with this, let's get started with the analysis by looking at this important article on page number 1 of the Delhi edition. This article refers to a tragic event that occurred in Kuwait in West Asia. I'm sure many of you would have heard of Kuwait. It has one of the world's largest oil reserves. It is said to have the 6th largest oil reserves in the world. And Kuwait is a very small nation, a very small West Asian country with a very small population of around 4.2 million. Out of its small population, majority of the people in Kuwait, the majority of residents in Kuwait, they're all outsiders, they're all migrant workers. And majority of these migrant workers are Indians. So yesterday, a tragic incident occurred in Kuwait where an apartment building which was housing the migrant workers, majority of them being Indian workers, caught fire. This fire tragedy has led to close to 4950 deaths, and 40 of them were Indian migrant workers. So this has been one of the greatest tragedies that we have seen in recent times occurring in West Asia, particularly where Indian nationals were affected. In fact, the incident is so significant that Prime Minister and even India's Foreign Minister, both of them tweeted about this tragedy and expressed their condolences. Prime Minister Modi even convened an emergency meeting and has taken stock of the situation. The Indian embassy in Kuwait has been reaching out to the victims, and the Prime Minister has also dispatched the MOS in the External Affairs Ministry to reach Kuwait and assist in the entire process of retrieving the bodies of Indian nationals and bringing them back to India. So this tragedy brings up a very, very important topic which is relevant for GS paper 2 under international relations. Many of you might be wondering, how is the topic relevant for the exam? The topic is very, very important under international relations because if you look at the syllabus of GS paper 2, Under international relations, the safety and well-being of Indian diaspora is a very important topic. The UPSC has explicitly mentioned the interests of the Indian diaspora is relevant for India's interests, and thus it is relevant for our exams as well. So if you look at Kuwait and the larger West Asia region, we have a very strong Indian community present across these countries who are residing over here, working, some of them studying as well. And ensuring the overall safety and well-being of the Indian community has been a top priority for the Indian government. So in this context, we need to understand the composition of Indian migrant workers in Kuwait and in West Asia and talk about the various challenges, problems that they have been facing. Because the Indian community in West Asia is a very vibrant community. They play a critical role in India's relations with West Asian countries. If you look at India-Kuwait relations, it is primarily driven by the Indian community which is working in Kuwait. They form the backbone of Kuwait's oil-driven economy. They play a critical role in promoting Indian interests and Indian influence in Kuwait. And this is the case across West Asia region. So it becomes very crucial to understand the presence of Indian community in Kuwait and in West Asia. What is their role? What are they contributing? And what challenges, what concerns are they facing? If you look at Kuwait specifically, as I told you, it's an oil-driven economy. It is considered to have the 6th largest oil reserves in the world. So the oil industry of Kuwait is largely manned by migrant workers. Because Kuwait has a very small population, it's a very small country. Its population is hardly around 4.2 million, and majority of the population, they are migrant workers. They are from other countries, usually from developing, underdeveloped countries. And Indian workers constitute the biggest percentage, the biggest chunk of Kuwait's resident population. Let me give you the numbers as well. The Indian workers account for 21% of Kuwait's population. There are more than 1 million Indians residing and working in Kuwait. Now, this is a very important number, a very significant number. If you take the Kuwait's workforce into account, 9 lakh workers, almost 30% of its workforce, is comprised of Indian migrant workers. Now, the point is, from which part of India are these workers migrating to Kuwait? Why are they migrating to Kuwait in the first place? And also, more importantly, in what sectors are they working? If you look at the composition of the Indian migrant workers, right, you find a very stark contrast. There are few white-collared migrant workers who are very well educated, who are highly skilled, who are working in Kuwait. For example, there are doctors, engineers, technicians, management consultants, etc. They all have very good education, high level of skills. They do secure high paying jobs in countries like Kuwait. So many people, especially from South India, from Kerala in particular, even Tamil Nadu, coastal Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and also from few other parts of India like Punjab, Maharashtra, Gujarat, even UP and Bihar. These states are the primary contributors as far as the Indian migrant population in Kuwait is concerned. These Indians are primarily looking for better livelihood opportunities, better job opportunities. So a small percentage of the migrant workers from India, they are employed as white-collar laborers or white-collar workers, which means they have high education level or high skill set. They secure high-paying jobs. But if you look at the entire migrant force from India in Kuwait, if you take the 1 million Indian workers, the white-collared workers constitute a very small percentage. They account for a very small percentage amongst the total migrant workers in Kuwait. Because majority of the migrant workers going from India to Kuwait, they're all employed as blue-collared laborers. What do you mean by blue-collared work? Blue-collared workers are those who are not very well educated, right? They would have very little educational background and they would have very limited skill set. They are completely unskilled or semi-skilled. So from India, majority of the workers who go to Kuwait to work are unskilled, semi-skilled workers falling under the blue-collared category. Of course, as I said, there are doctors, engineers, and others with a higher degree, higher qualification, higher skills who take up white-collar jobs, but this is a very small percentage. Majority of the workers, lakhs of them, out of this 1 million, right? They are all semi-skilled or unskilled. So the reason why they are finding jobs in countries like Kuwait is primarily because of desperation, due to the lack of opportunities in India, and also the dream of living abroad, the dream of having a better livelihood, a better standard of living, is what drives lakhs of Indian youth out of the country, and they seek out job opportunities in other countries. This is the case not just with Kuwait. Across West Asia, we find a similar trend. If you look at the entire West Asia region, from UAE to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, Bahrain, then Jordan, Lebanon. So across this region, the map, you can see the number of countries present here. So from Oman to Turkey, even in Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq as well at one point, Iraq and Syria also, they held a number of Indian workers, used to find job opportunities over here. Of course, after the conflict situation, many Indians have left Iraq and Syria, but in the other countries present, from Saudi to Qatar to Bahrain to Kuwait, there are millions of Indians employed across West Asian countries. In fact, the Indian community across West Asia lies at the very heart and center of India's relations with West Asian countries. Again, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the total number of Indian workers in West Asia, it's around 10 to 12 million. There are 10 to 12 million workers from India working in West Asian countries. Is that clear? See, West Asia region has always been very crucial to India, especially because of oil supplies. West Asian countries have been the primary suppliers of oil and gas to India, thus guaranteeing India's energy security. But apart from that, the next big aspect of India's relations with West Asian countries happens to be the Indian community working across these countries. We have such a large diaspora community in the range of 10 to 11 million. And if you look at the breakdown of numbers according to each country, in the entire region, the largest concentration of Indian workers can be found in the United Arab Emirates. The UAE is home to close to 3.5 to 4 million Indian workers. This is followed by Saudi Arabia, hosting around 2.5 to 3 million Indian workers, because this data that I've shared here is from 2022. The numbers would have definitely gone up in the last couple of years as well. So in UAE and Saudi Arabia itself, cumulatively, we have close to 7 to 8 million Indian workers in just these two countries. And it's obvious as well because both the countries, they are the top economies as well of the region. Then you have Kuwait with more than 1 million Indian workers, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, and others. So if you look at small countries like Kuwait or even Bahrain for that matter, these small West Asian monarchies, they have a very small population. In fact, their population, native population is so less that migrant workers have outnumbered the native population. You look at Bahrain, for example, even Qatar and even Kuwait, the native population is lesser than the outside migrant workforce. And large number of migrant workers in these countries are from India. Apart from India, they come from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, even Philippines. So if you look at this composition, you can clearly understand that it's usually from developing and underdeveloped countries that semi-skilled, unskilled workers are desperately trying to go to West Asia because it's an easy route for them to find a better job, to have a better life, a better livelihood. Now this is where the risks, the challenges come up, not just for the migrant workers, but for the governments as well, such as the Indian government. Because the Indian workers here in Kuwait and also across these countries, they have been facing numerous challenges over the years. But before we discuss the challenges, first let me tell you the contribution of the Indian diaspora in West Asia. Then you will easily understand why Indian government has a responsibility to protect them, to safeguard them. If you look at yesterday's event, the tragic incident that happened, right? Look at the response from India. The Prime Minister called an emergency meeting. A MOS has been sent, already dispatched to Kuwait. The Indian embassy has been pushed into action. So there has been very proactive response from the Indian government. So why do you think that is the case? It's because the Indian government has a direct stake, a direct interest in ensuring the safety, the well-being of the Indian community. That's because the Indian community abroad plays a critical role in our foreign policy. They make a very big contribution to our foreign relations. So across West Asia and even around the world, from US to Europe to Africa to Southeast Asia to Australia, around the world we have a very strong Indian community abroad, and they're all acting as cultural ambassadors of India. They are promoting the soft power values associated with India. They are promoting Indian food, Indian customs, Indian languages. They are essentially acting as the cultural representatives, the cultural ambassadors of India. This generates tremendous soft power for India. This soft power influence could be leveraged by India in its foreign relations. Many Indians abroad, they might get into influential positions. Some of the Indians abroad, they might get into influential positions either in business or in government, and this could become a leverage for India. India can leverage those contacts to put some kind of pressure on the host governments in order to drive close relations between India and the other country. And also collectively, Indian workers play a critical role in many countries. You look at Kuwait, you look at Bahrain, Qatar, UAE as well. Their economies, their oil economies are dependent on Indian workers. Even their infrastructure sector, the construction industry, which is very massive in West Asia, is dependent on Indian workers, thus giving India a leverage over these countries. Without Indian labor, practically these countries won't be able to run their economies. Of course, there are migrant workers from other countries as well, but Indian workers bring the best possible talent, even if they are unskilled or semi-skilled, right? They are hardworking, they are law-abiding, they don't create any trouble usually wherever they are settled, and as a result, they are widely preferred by the employers in the other countries. So this gives India a leverage, a unique influence across these countries. Then more importantly, these Indian workers, they send back remittances. They send back money to their families in India. And these remittances are crucial for the Indian economy. It adds to our forex reserves. It helps in bridging our current account deficit. Is that clear? If you look at West Asia alone, I'm talking only about West Asia region. Just from the West Asian countries, Indian workers, they are contributing to more than 55% of the total remittances that we are receiving. Now, does anyone know what is the total amount of remittances that we get in a given year? If you know that, please mention that in the comments. In the last couple of years, for example, what is the total volume of remittances India has received from abroad through Indian workers, migrant workers from abroad? So out of the total amount, almost 50 to 55% of it is coming just from West Asia region. So these 10 to 11 million Indian workers who are working across these West Asian countries, they are contributing more than 50% of our inward bound remittances. This is crucial for the Indian economy. So the Indian diaspora, the Indian workers abroad, they're contributing to India's foreign policy interests and they're contributing to the Indian economy as well. So it's natural for the government of India to look after their safety and well-being. Because the Indian community abroad faces a number of risks, a number of threats. Across West Asia, there is a lot of instability. I'm sure many of you are aware of this. There are civil wars which have taken place, for example, in the North Africa region, in West Asia as well, from Syria to Lebanon to Yemen. The region has seen a lot of instability. Civil wars, conflicts, terrorism, extremism. So all these threats directly pose a risk to the lives of Indian community present in these countries. So in many cases, we had to rescue and evacuate the Indians from some of these countries. For example, when Yemen descended into a civil war in 2014, when the Houthis, sponsored by Iran, they managed to topple the Yemeni government and Yemen descended into a civil war, there were thousands of Indian workers who were trapped, almost 5,000 Indian workers. They were all rescued by the Indian government through the Indian Armed Forces under Operation Rahat. Then Lebanon also descended into conflict with Israel in 2005-2006. Thousands of Indian workers were trapped in Lebanon, and they were all rescued by India under Operation Sukoon, which was carried out under the then Manmohan Singh government. So like this, we have seen many situations where Indians have been trapped, where their lives are at risk because of the civil wars, ongoing conflicts, and also due to the political instability in general seen across West Asia. Apart from this, Indian workers face many other problems. For example, Indian workers are often duped by middlemen, especially the unskilled or semi-skilled workers. They are often duped by the middlemen in the name of getting them a job. So if you look at states like, let's say, Kerala, or even part of coastal Karnataka, or Bihar and Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, in several rural pockets, right, the youth especially, they are very eager, very desperate to get out of India to find a better opportunity abroad. They may not have adequate knowledge, education, skills, even awareness. They may not even have a basic passport. They simply approach the middlemen, right, and they pay them a huge commission to get them the basic documents and even to get them a job abroad. Many of these middlemen might be involved with human trafficking cartels, or they might be just fraudsters. They take large sums of money from them, few lakh rupees from these youth who have no awareness, no knowledge, no skills, and promise them a job. Sometimes they do secure a job for them, but after reaching the country, right, they face a completely different kind of horror story. I'll come to that in a short while. But even before securing a job and traveling to that country, within India itself, they might be duped by the middlemen. In many cases, they may not even get them the passport or the visas or a job opportunity. So several youth are duped in this manner, and there are certain instances where the middlemen would be colluding with human trafficking cartels and drug trafficking cartels. So they will use the Indian youth who are very eager for a job abroad, right? And they will force them to carry contraband or illegal substances, including drugs, or sometimes they traffic the youth, right? They push them, force them into forced labor. There are cases where women migrant workers and even children, right, especially the girl child, they are often trafficked to some of these countries and pushed into prostitution as well. So there are such cases, there are such horror stories where Indian workers have been abused, misused. They are defrauded by the middlemen in the first case. And also, they are often employed in very hazardous industries. If they somehow manage to secure a job with the help of the middlemen, right, they land in the country, but they realize they may not have the required documents. All the documents may not be in place. And sometimes the employers, they misuse this to their advantage. Or even if they have all the documents in place, they have secured a job as well. Still, the employers don't treat them right. They mistreat them quite often. Usually, the Indian workers they are pushed into these small quarters, small apartments, where they are supposed to share the space with many more workers. The living conditions are extremely horrific by some of these employers, right? Sometimes they don't pay the salaries on time. They confiscate the passports as well so that they don't leave the country. And as I said, women migrant workers and children especially, they are at greater risk of being pushed into human trafficking rings and forced labor and prostitution as well. So many such horrific incidents have occurred with Indian workers, especially the blue-collared workers. The white-collared workers don't face these risks because they have the right skills, right education. They'll easily land a high-paying job. So they are not at risk, but the blue-collared workers, they face a bigger risk, a bigger challenge. So that is what worries India. That is what concerns India. So there are problems with regard to salaries as well. Salaries are not paid on time, or the salary given is not adequate. And also the social security in the form of insurance, pensions, this is not sufficient, or sometimes it is completely absent or missing. So any such issue directly concerns the Indian government because we are worried about the well-being of the Indian community. Be it the Indian workers being duped by middlemen, or be it Indian workers being pushed to commit organized crime on behalf of criminal cartels like smuggling drugs, or be it Indians being pushed into human trafficking rings, being pushed into forced labor or prostitution, or even the various risks and challenges they face in the work and living conditions. All these issues remain a major concern for India. The reason why I'm highlighting this and stressing upon this is because look at what happened yesterday. In the Kuwait fire tragedy, around 49-50 people have lost their lives in this apartment building. 40 of them were Indian workers. This entire apartment, which is a very small building, was housing several migrant workers who were jammed into a small building. So obviously fire safety regulations were not followed. The living conditions were very hazardous. That is the reason why Indian workers have paid such a big price, and many of them were from the state of Kerala. So that is the reason why it's important to understand the plight of Indian workers, especially the blue-collared workers who are struggling in West Asian countries. They do earn well, they do send money back to their families, but many of them face these various challenges, and that is what worries India. That is why India pays special attention to West Asia, and we are engaging with all these countries, with all these governments, to ensure that the Indian community is protected. We engage with these governments to ensure that there are adequate labor codes to protect the safety, the financial well-being, the social security of the Indian migrant workers. So this is a key driving factor of India's relations with all the West Asian countries. So that is what you need to understand from this tragic incident. So based on this, there can be a question asked by UPSC. So let's take a look and let's see how you can build a good answer for such a question. See, our idea is to make sure the Hindu analysis session every day becomes a one-stop solution for all your current affairs challenges. Apart from covering the newspaper, right, apart from covering important editorials, columns and other small articles, we will ensure we'll discuss a couple of mains practice questions, provide you a structure for answer writing. Whenever possible, we'll try to bring in PYQs from prelims and mains so that it's a comprehensive discussion. So look at this question. Indian diaspora lie at the heart of India's relations with West Asia. That's the statement which has been given. Examine their role in promoting Indian influence in the region and challenges the community has been facing. So if you read the question, understand the question, I think it should be pretty straightforward as to how you can build an answer for this question. So first you can start with an introduction. The introduction, remember, always has to be a little impactful. It should be relevant to the given question. So don't beat around the bush, don't write any unnecessary points because you have a strict word limit. Plus, of course, there is a time limit that you have to maintain. So ensure that you begin your answer appropriately to the given question. Always try to hit the nail on its head. Don't unnecessarily talk about India-West Asia relations. It's not required. You don't have to talk about India-West Asia energy relations. That's not relevant to the question that has been asked. Question is specific to the Indian diaspora in West Asia, right? How are they at the heart of our relations and what challenges are they facing? So what you can do is present the data in the introduction. Talk about the number of Indian workers in West Asia. That's why I gave you those numbers. You don't have to by heart the exact numbers. That's not needed. Just approximate numbers are enough. Just mention that West Asia is a big source of employment for Indian migrant workers. Close to 10 to 11 million Indians are employed across West Asian countries. That's a great opening statement. Next, talk about the composition. Amongst these Indian workers, classify them into white-collared and blue-collared workers. This is very important. So small percentage of them are white-collared workers, but majority of them, large majority of them are blue-collared workers. Meaning they are not well-educated, they are unskilled or semi-skilled. Then also try to provide the top countries which employ the Indian workers. At least the top three. UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. That is easy to remember. So once you have presented the picture about the Indian diaspora in West Asia, then we can easily talk about the contribution they are making to India-West Asia relations and also the challenges that they are facing. This is where you need to add some real examples and incidents to substantiate your argument. So, contribution, you can talk about how they are adding to India's soft power influence, acting as our cultural ambassadors, helping India leverage their role and influence those governments in India's favor. Talk about the remittances that they are sending back. How more than 50% of our total inward remittances is coming from West Asian countries. So that is the biggest contribution they are making. Now talk about the challenges. What challenges are there to the safety and well-being of the Indian diaspora? Maybe you can discuss civil wars, conflicts, give examples like Yemen, Syria, etc., Lebanon. Then talk about the labor-related issues, how they are defrauded by middlemen, or after landing in the country, how they are often abused by the employers, or how criminal cartels might engage them and misuse them and abuse them. So mention all these risk factors, the challenges, and if you are aware of any examples or incidents, try to present that as well. For example, the recent fire incident in Kuwait. So once you discuss the contribution and challenges, then you always need a good conclusion. Basically, you need to present a solution on how we can better safeguard the interests of the Indian community, right? That is what you need to point out. So talk about how India has been proactive to protect the well-being of the Indian community. You can talk about how India has evacuated Indians when there were major conflicts in the region, right? Give examples of Operation Rahat, etc. So similarly, when it comes to labor welfare, when it comes to other issues that affect the migrant workers, India needs to maybe implement certain initiatives, and through our diplomacy, we need to work with these governments. For example, we can crack down on the middlemen by collaborating with these countries to ensure that they are not defrauded, right? There can be better regulation of the travel industry and the entire nexus that exists between the middlemen and the employers. This can be better regulated. So in India, we can better regulate the middlemen who are facilitating their travel. Those governments, the West Asian governments, can better regulate the employers there and enforce the labor codes and labor standards so that they don't abuse the migrant workers. Ensure they get timely salaries, good living conditions, a decent house, ensure that salaries are paid on time, and ensure that they are not mistreated, right? They're not abused and forced into labor or into trafficking. So this essentially can be driven by India, and since we have very good ties with most West Asian countries, we can easily exercise that influence. So discuss a solution on these lines, provide a conclusion, and that completes your answer. So please take up this question based on the structure I have discussed. Write an answer and please post the answer in the comment section. Now let's look at the next article. It's actually a related article, a very small article. On page number 12, there is an article carried by the Hindu that refers to the death of 2 Indians in the Ukraine war, in the Russia-Ukraine war. Now this is an ongoing story. It's ongoing development. In fact, I've discussed this topic in complete detail a few months ago. Because a few months ago as well, 2 Indians were reported dead as far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict was concerned. And there have been several Indians, more than 100 Indian youth who have been misled to join the Russian army. So Russia has been hiring foreign youth, especially from developing, underdeveloped countries like India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, etc. And they are being duped to join the Russian armed services, and they are being pushed into the front lines, into the battlefield. So this has emerged as a huge scam, a scandal, and this is directly affecting the well-being of the Indian youth who are being misled. So again, this is about search for opportunities. It's about search for a better livelihood. So from states like Andhra Pradesh, even Maharashtra and Gujarat, Punjab, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka as well, there are few Indian youth who are looking for better jobs, better opportunities. Some were already working in West Asian countries. But the middlemen, they have misled some of the youth by promising a lucrative job in Russia. They have said that you will get very good salaries if you take up this particular assignment in Russia, right? And they have even promised Russian citizenship if they work for a few months. But they wouldn't reveal initially that they're supposed to work for the Russian army. Many of these middlemen, they have attracted the youth on YouTube and social media by spreading misinformation. They have leveraged social media platforms including YouTube to spread this particular job opportunity, right? And to promote this job opportunity, saying it's a very lucrative opportunity in Russia where you can earn lakhs of rupees a month with eventual citizenship of Russia. This obviously is enticing, attractive for any unskilled or semi-skilled worker, and many of them have fallen prey to this scam, unfortunately. They even end up paying lakhs of rupees to these middlemen. So they are forced to travel to Russia. They are secured a visa. Only after they land in Russia, right? Only then they realize what's happening, right? They are forced to sign a contract which is in Russian language, which the Indian workers cannot understand. Essentially, it's a contract to work for the Russian army, right? Some of the Indian workers have been told that they are just working as porters, as just those who provide logistical support. Some of them have been briefed that they are going to work for the Russian army, but only for support and resupplies. But these have been complete manufactured lies, because most of these Indian youth, also the youth from Nepal, Sri Lanka and other countries, they've actually been pushed into the front lines to fight against Ukraine. So basically, Russia has committed a grave human right error by bringing in foreign nationals, that to those who are not so well off, right? And it has misled them to join the Russian armed services, and now they are being pushed to the front lines to fight this war. So already tragedy has hit India. 2 Indians had lost their lives a few months ago. Now, according to new reports, 2 more Indians have lost their lives in Ukraine. Now, obviously, India is furious about this. India has taken this up at the highest level with Russia, with the Russian embassy in Delhi and also in Moscow. India has exerted pressure on Russia to completely put a stop to this practice. Many Indians have been brought back. They have been repatriated. And India has been trying to work with the families as well, right, to ensure that the youth are identified, because once they are in the battlefield, contact with them might become very difficult. And the worst part is that these Indian workers who are misled to join the Russian army, right, they have no battle skills. They have no combat training, right? They don't even have basic education. They are semi-skilled or unskilled. They were doing basic jobs either in India or in West Asia. They were largely duped by these middlemen who pushed them into Russia by misleading them, and then they were forced to join the Russian army and eventually pushed into the front lines. So before being pushed into the battlefield, according to reports, Russian army has only given them some basic combat training. Very basic combat training has been given to them, so they don't have the required military skills. So it's very hard for such an individual to survive in a hardcore battlefield. That is the reason why many foreign nationals, Indians and other nationals as well, they are getting injured, they are losing their lives, and this has become a matter of direct concern for India. So India has already brought back several of the youth who are employed with the Russian army, but the practice apparently continues, and according to these reports, 2 more Indians have lost their lives. So now India has stepped up the pressure. India has made it very clear to Russia that it cannot employ Indians to fight its war in Ukraine. India has called upon Russia to put a verified stop, meaning a complete stop to hiring Indians, and this should be verifiable by India. There should be a guarantee, a diplomatic guarantee given to India that Russia will no longer continue to enroll Indians into its armed forces and push them into the front lines. So this is something we need to understand. It's a related topic to what we discussed earlier. Now, let's look at the next article. We have a very important column on page number 9. This article is related to fatty liver disease. See, today is marked as International Fatty Liver Day. The 13th of June is celebrated. It is marked around the world as International Fatty Liver Day to raise awareness, to promote greater awareness about fatty liver disease. So the writers who are doctors, they are talking about the role of the liver in our physiological function. Liver plays a very crucial role, right, in the human body. But fatty liver disease has emerged as a major risk factor, and the prevalence of fatty liver disease has gone up significantly, not just in India but around the world. This is a life-threatening condition. Is that clear? So let's understand what role does the liver play in our physiological function? What are the risks to the liver as an organ, right? And what is fatty liver disease? What are the types of fatty liver disease? What are the causes? What are the symptoms? And how do we handle this deadly epidemic of sorts which has started affecting people around the world? This is more of a lifestyle related disorder, so it becomes all the more important to pay attention to it, because obesity, diabetes, they become risk factors which contributes to fatty liver disease, and in a way it aggravates other lifestyle conditions as well. So first let's talk about the role of the liver. The liver is one of the largest organs, by the way, present in the abdomen, right? And it's often referred to as a gland because it secretes some essential fluids which is very critical for metabolic functions in our body. The liver is essentially like a filter, filters out your blood, removes the toxicity, the impurities, and it is absolutely crucial for a normal physiological function. There are various lifestyle conditions and diseases that can damage the liver, and any liver damage can be life-threatening. So the primary function of liver is to purify your blood. It purifies blood, processes nutrients, destroys the old RBCs, plays a big role in detoxification, removing toxic substances from the blood, breaks down the hazardous substances that we put in our body, from alcohol to even medications. Some of them are not easily digestible, right? So these hazardous substances are broken down from alcohol to medications. They are broken down by your liver. Now this is where the problem arises as well. If there is a problem in breaking down these nutrients, these hazardous substances, that is where the risk of fatty liver disease comes up. It is very crucial for multiple metabolic functions, and by the way, it produces bile juice as well, right, which plays a critical role in the entire digestive process and the metabolic process. So let's understand what are the risks and what kind of disease could be seen as far as the liver is concerned. So fatty liver disease, right, there are two types. You have non-alcoholic and alcoholic. So essentially, excessive alcohol consumption, especially alcohol abuse, almost on a daily basis for a long period of time, results in this deadly condition called alcoholic fatty liver disease. See, a healthy liver looks nothing like this. A healthy liver would look something like this, which was there in the previous image. But due to excessive alcohol consumption, right, there could be massive amount of fat deposition, or what we call as visceral fat, that gets deposited on the liver, which could result in a condition called steatosis. It's a medical term that refers to deposition of fat on a particular organ, which is the liver in this case. Now this can occur not just because of alcohol consumption. This can happen even with teetotalers. You may never have touched alcohol in your life, still you can suffer from fatty liver disease because of a bad lifestyle along with some genetic factors as well. Let's say you're consuming food which is very high in carbs and sugar. This is extremely dangerous for your liver, because see, when your diet primarily comprises of sugar and carbs, right, your body releases insulin to essentially absorb the excess glucose from every cell. But if you keep adding more carbs and sugar, at one point the higher insulin production leads to insulin resistance, right? Your cells will basically become non-receptive to insulin, and sugar deposition starts going up. So to tackle the higher glucose levels, what your liver does is that it will take away the higher glucose content which is not being broken down, and it turns that into fat, and this fat deposits on the liver. So higher carbs and sugar consumption will directly contribute to fat deposition on the liver, and this could lead to deadly conditions. Alright, so it's a lifestyle disorder as well. Even a bad diet, very poor or limited exercise, and a diet which is high in carbs and sugar, right? This leads to obesity, leads to diabetes, and the liver disease is linked and it's interconnected. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has become widely prevalent. whereas alcoholic fatty liver disease is relatively less prevalent, because usually these cases are less. The number of people who consume alcohol on those levels usually out of the entire population is relatively lesser. But people who consume more carbs and sugar, that number is many times higher. According to many studies, 33% of India's population will develop fatty liver disease, either alcoholic fatty liver condition or non-alcoholic fatty liver condition. Majority of the cases will be non-alcoholic. So it's very important to detect the condition at the earliest stage. It's very important to treat the condition at the earliest stage, or else it could get very worse, right? It might reach a stage where the liver will fail entirely. The patient would require a liver transplantation, and this could be a fatal condition as well. Now, what exactly happens to the liver, right? Because of such a bad lifestyle, either due to alcohol abuse or due to a bad diet, right? There is fat deposition which is happening over a period of years. So this fatty liver, what does it do? What does it cause? That's what we should understand. So as the fat deposition increases, as the steatosis keeps on increasing with time, right, it only results in a small layer of fat deposition, which is not entirely harmful. But if this abuse continues, let's say the alcoholic keeps drinking more and more alcohol, or a person with a bad diet keeps eating more carbs, sugar, he has no control over his weight or his diabetes, the steatosis keeps on increasing, and then it could lead to a condition, a disease called the MASH condition and the MASLD disease. What is MASH? MASH. MASH stands for Metabolic Dysfunction Associated Steatohepatitis. The function of your liver gets compromised. Production of bile, its ability to purify blood, to remove the toxins, gets compromised, leading to a hepatitis kind of condition, which can even lead to jaundice. Is that clear? So this is a very deadly condition. From here onwards, the liver can further deteriorate. You can suffer from fibrosis, cirrhosis, leading to liver scarring, right? The liver could get scarred, inflammation could occur, where the liver could enlarge in size, and it could affect other connected organs like the spleen, which is very crucial for your immunity, right? Because liver is located close to other key organs, from pancreas to gallbladder to the spleen. They could get affected as the liver enlarges due to the inflammation, and eventually the liver could become non-functional. It could lead to the burst of the blood vessels, causing blood clots, septic infections, and the condition can become very fatal as well. So such a progressive chronic degenerative liver disease is called Metabolic Dysfunction Associated Steatotic Liver Disease, or MASLD. So fatty liver is a condition. Fatty liver in itself is not a disease. Fatty liver condition, either alcoholic or non-alcoholic, can result in MASH condition, where steatohepatitis is reported. This deterioration will cause cirrhosis, inflammation, scarring, etc., and finally results in this condition called MASLD. Is that clear? So there is a way available to detect this at an early stage, because many people develop this condition, and the worst part is that, and unfortunate part is that, initially there are no symptoms at all. Initially, when the fat deposition starts, when the steatosis begins, either due to alcohol consumption or due to a bad lifestyle, there are no signs, no symptoms at all. Only when it reaches a later stage, right? Only when advanced MASH condition begins, only then many patients start feeling the symptoms, only then they get tested, and by that point it's already too late. So that is why the writers of the column are advocating for early screening and testing. Early screening and testing is the best way to detect the condition and provide the appropriate treatment, so that you can prevent the full failure of the liver, you can avoid a liver transplant, and you can avoid a possible fatal situation. Is that clear? And also, the liver disease, the fatty liver disease, right, once it turns into the MASH condition, it is associated with increased risk of cardiac arrest, cancer, and many other deadly conditions. So this progressive chronic condition, right, it can easily lead to heart attacks and as well as cancer, right? And that is the reason why it's very important to pay attention to such lifestyle related diseases. So the problem here is many people don't get tested. Usually you have to do an annual test, right? There are cases of late where even children, teenagers, young adults are also reporting fatty liver disease. Either it's due to alcohol abuse, which begins at a very young age in some cases, right? Or it could be due to obesity and a very bad diet comprising high carb and sugar content. So right from a very early age, it should be a regular practice for everyone, all of us, to get a yearly checkup, not just a blood test, but also an ultrasound. Ultrasound is absolutely critical in the early detection of fatty liver disease. All right, ultrasound provides a clear inclination, at least a basic reading will be available to the doctor that fatty liver condition is present. Then there are other methods available. For example, elastography. It's a new diagnostic tool, a very advanced diagnostic tool, vibration controlled transient elastography. This provides complete information on the health of your liver. Once ultrasound detects a fatty liver condition, elastography can be conducted, which will give the doctor an idea about the extent of fat deposition, the damage which has happened to the liver, whether scarring has begun, cirrhosis has begun, is it inflamed, right? What is the firmness of the liver? Such vital information becomes available, and the best part is that it is non-invasive. It does not require any surgery or procedure or any invasive intrusion into your body. So using ultrasound elastography, right, both are non-invasive procedures, you can easily determine the health of your liver. So this should become a regular practice. Since almost 30+% of the population reports fatty liver disease eventually, it's better to undergo the test regularly, to undergo metabolic screening and ultrasound test and elastography from time to time, so that you can catch the condition as early as possible and treat the condition as well, right? If it can't be entirely reversed, at least in the early stage you can minimize the fat deposition, you can try to reverse some of the damage which has been done, which can increase the lifespan significantly. It can help avoid the other complications from cardiac arrest, further obesity and diabetes to cancer. All these further complications can be avoided and the person would be still able to lead a healthy life. So early screening and testing is the only option and the best way. But of course, prevention is better than cure. The best way is to avoid alcohol, don't touch alcohol, and have a better diet, a better lifestyle. So there needs to be greater awareness about fatty liver disease because many people don't have that awareness, right? So let's take up a practice question quickly on this topic. The high prevalence and low detection of fatty liver disease has become a global concern. Examine. So how do you approach such a question? Again, in the introduction, talk about the role of the liver. What does the liver do? Why is it such a critical organ? Or instead of talking about the liver, you can present some data about fatty liver disease. You can present some relevant data about fatty liver disease if you are aware of it. If not exact data, at least approximate data. Because the question is saying there is a high prevalence of fatty liver disease, but there is low detection. That is the opening statement of the question. So you can do justice to the question by talking about the prevalence of fatty liver disease. What is the extent of the disease burden? Right? Globally, usually the number is around 30% and above. Right? Especially in developing countries as well, even countries like India, where obesity has become very prevalent. Even alcohol consumption has gone up. This is a major risk. So please paint a picture of the high prevalence and also point out that many people don't get detected, they don't get tested due to the lack of symptoms. This is a very important analysis. There is high prevalence, almost 30% of the population suffers from it, but there is no adequate testing done because people have no symptoms initially. By the time they start getting the symptoms, it's already too late. So lack of symptoms is a major concern, a challenge, which is leading to low detection rate. So set this right in the introduction itself. Then in the body, maybe you can talk about the role of the liver and what is causing the fatty liver disease. talk about the different types, the two types, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and the causes, discuss the symptoms which I was mentioning, and the complications that arise out of it. Talk about the MASH and MASLD condition, how it can increase the chances of cardiac arrest, cancer, etc., and contribute to reduced lifespan. In the body then, you can discuss the solution, or maybe you can take it to the conclusion and discuss the solution here. One is, of course, a better lifestyle, avoiding alcohol, better diet, healthy lifestyle, etc., ensuring that you tackle obesity, avoid diabetes or delay diabetes. This is crucial. Then also talk about early detection, which requires regular screening and testing. Mention the technologies like ultrasound, elastography, and how the government can roll this out, promote early detection and testing on a large scale, right, through public healthcare institutions and through private hospitals. Because right now ultrasound, elastography are quite expensive. Not everyone can afford these screening technologies. So making them more affordable, more accessible, with more investments in public healthcare is going to be crucial. So you can mention that under the existing healthcare schemes like Ayushman Bharat and the other public health initiatives, right, there should be more focus on liver health to tackle fatty liver disease. So that could be a very good way forward or a conclusion for your answer. So this completes my discussion of all the mains related articles. Now let's take a quick look at the prelim section. On page number 12, we have an article related to food inflation. According to the latest inflation numbers, the CPI inflation or retail level consumer price index, the inflation level has moderated, it has declined in the month of May. Compared to the retail inflation, CPI inflation in April, there has been a slight decline in CPI inflation for May. But however, food inflation remains a cause for concern, especially in urban India. If you look at essential food commodities like vegetables, pulses, cereal, egg, milk and meat, the prices have been consistently going up. Food inflation has remained persistent. In fact, it has been very adamant over the last couple of years. Food inflation mainly occurs due to higher demand and also any supply side constraints. Food commodities, especially like vegetables, etc., are very dependent on rainfall. They are dependent on weather conditions. So frequent heavy rainfall, floods or even droughts could destroy the crops, leading to shortage of essential vegetables and food commodities. Demand might spike as people have more money to spend. As their income goes up, there is a tendency to shift towards more protein based diet comprising of egg, milk, meat, etc., as people can afford them, which shoots up the demand, and this may not be able to be matched by the supply side. So this mismatch between demand and supply contributes to the persistent food inflation, which has remained very high. In fact, over the last many months, it's been between 8 to 9%. Is that clear? So such high levels of food inflation hurts the common man. It affects the affordability of common food items, from vegetables to cereals to milk. Is that clear? Now, food inflation is very volatile as well. That's another important concept you need to understand. Even fuel inflation, for that matter, is very volatile. That is why food and fuel inflation, they are excluded while calculating your core inflation. Is that clear? See, the CPI data which is brought out by the NSO, the National Statistical Office, it presents you the headline inflation number. This is what we call headline inflation. It tracks the inflation in a basket of different commodities. Now, out of headline inflation, if you deduct food and fuel inflation, if you take out food and fuel inflation, if you deduct food and fuel inflation, then you get your core inflation. Is that clear? That is why for policy makers, the finance ministry and the RBI, the central bank, which is responsible for tackling inflation, they primarily look at core inflation along with headline inflation. Because food and fuel inflation can be very volatile in nature. So determining monetary policy based on headline inflation might be incorrect due to the volatility associated with food and fuel inflation. That is why RBI, the central bank, largely looks at core inflation. All right. So who will play a bigger role in tackling food and fuel inflation? It's your government more than the RBI. RBI can play a bigger role in controlling core inflation, which could be due to excess liquidity, right? The monetary operations required for that will be conducted by the RBI. But to deal with food and fuel inflation, which are very volatile, it's the government which is largely responsible to manage the demand supply situation. Is that clear? So these are some important pointers that you can get from this article. Next, on page 16, there's an article related to the upcoming G7 summit. The G7 group of countries, it was established around 1973 during the global oil crisis. This oil crisis of 1970s brought all the major industrialized economies together. So US and Canada, then UK, France and Germany and Italy and Japan. These 7 industrialized economies came together to form the G7 eventually. At one point even Russia was part of it. It was called G8. But after 2014, after Russia annexed Crimean Peninsula of Ukraine, Russia was removed. It was thrown out of G8 and it became the G7 again. The G7 leaders meet annually every year to take stock of the global geopolitical situation, the global economy, and they also conduct an outreach. During the G7 summit, there's an outreach which is done to certain important countries. So this time the G7 summit is taking place in Italy. Italy is hosting the G7, and as part of the outreach, around 12 countries are invited, including India. India, South Africa, then Turkey, UAE, Algeria, Argentina. So all these emerging economies from around the world have also been invited, and Prime Minister Modi will be traveling to Italy. PM Modi will be traveling to Italy to take part in the G7 outreach and interact with the G7 leaders. So the headline says, all eyes will be on the interaction between Modi and Zelensky and Modi and Trudeau. But I know many of you will have your attention on Modi's interaction with Melanie, right? Rather, our social media would pay more attention to Modi's interaction with Melanie. But to be serious, India has some very important stakes at the upcoming G7. Because one, regarding Russia-Ukraine conflict, there is a proposed peace summit in Switzerland. Ukraine is pushing for a peace summit. The US has supported the initiative. And in a couple of days, on 15th of June, basically day after tomorrow, in the Swiss town of Bergenstock, a conference is going to take place, the peace conference, the Swiss peace conference, because Switzerland is a neutral country. It has declared political neutrality. It usually doesn't interfere in geopolitical matters. So Switzerland is hosting a peace conference on Ukraine, where Zelensky is hoping for a solution, a diplomatic solution, which can push Russia back and bring an end to this brutal war. So India will be taking part at the Swiss peace conference on Ukraine. So this is something we'll look forward to. We will cover this development in a few days. And also, Modi's interaction with Trudeau will generate a lot of interest, because India-Canada relations have been very adversely hit following Canada's allegations that India was involved in the assassination of a Khalistani extremist. Recently, Canada has even allowed pro-Khalistan rallies to be held, which has angered India. And right now, our ties are at an all-time low. So any interaction between Modi and Trudeau would be very interesting to watch for, right? And that is why the upcoming G7 outreach is very important. Next, we have another important article related to environment ecology. There are some important data numbers from this article. Please make a note of this. According to a recent scientific study published in a scientific journal, India has been ranked as the second largest emitter of nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide, I hope you know, is a deadly greenhouse gas. This scientific report has brought out the nitrous oxide budget. The nitrous oxide budget has been brought out. Just like you have a carbon budget, right? That plays a big role in understanding climate change, in tackling carbon related emissions. Similarly, this study has brought out the nitrous oxide budget. What amount of nitrous oxide is tolerable in the atmosphere? What rate are we emitting nitrous oxide right now? And what is the remaining budget available? So this budget has been brought out, and according to it, China is the world's top most emitter of nitrous oxide. China is contributing around 16% of nitrous oxide emissions. This is followed by India at the second position with around 11% contribution. Is that clear? This is very important to note. Now, what is the source of nitrous oxide emission? Which is the biggest source? The anthropogenic source. There are few natural sources, but that is very minimal. The anthropogenic sources are the risk factor. It's primarily from agriculture. Primarily from agriculture because of fertilizer usage. Nitrogen-based fertilizers, which are rampantly used in agriculture to boost productivity. This is primarily responsible for nitrous oxide emissions. Is that clear? Apart from this, there are few industrial activities and also vehicular combustion, which can also release oxides of nitrogen. But the primary contributor is the fertilizers, nitrogen-based fertilizers used in agriculture. Now, nitrous oxide is of great concern. In fact, it is of a very serious concern even compared to carbon dioxide because it is many times more potent as far as its global warming potential is concerned. If you compare the global warming potential of nitrous oxide, one molecule of nitrous oxide with one molecule of CO2, the global warming potential of nitrous oxide is many times higher than that of CO2. So you might ask, then why are we concentrating so much on carbon emissions? Right? The whole world is obsessed only with carbon emissions. If nitrous oxide has a much higher global warming potential, then why aren't we paying it the same attention? Let me explain this. If you look at the concentration of these greenhouse gases, right, in the atmosphere, CO2 concentration is many thousand times higher than nitrous oxide. That is the reason why more attention is paid to reduction of carbon emissions and to phase out carbon emissions. But nitrous oxide also deserves equal attention because it is long lasting. It remains in the atmosphere for a longer time, a longer duration, for hundreds of years compared to carbon dioxide. And it doesn't break down easily. So it keeps contributing to global warming, and it is essential to focus on nitrous oxide as well, because according to studies, nitrous oxide emissions alone have contributed to an increase in temperature of 0.1 degree Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels. Alright, so all the data, the analysis is very important. You can get a direct prelims question based on this. Coming to page number 16, we have another article here, the last article for today, and we can close the session after this. The article is referring to another attack in the Red Sea on a commercial ship, most likely by the Houthi rebels of Yemen. This attack has been reported near a strategic port, the port of Hodeida. So let's see where this port is located. Why is the port significant? So you can look at the map here. It's showing you the West Asia region. You can see the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the strategic Bab al-Mandeb Strait. This is the country of Yemen, where the Houthis are based out of. Ever since the Gaza war began, Iran has been using the Houthis as a proxy to target the commercial ships passing through the Red Sea route. Especially Israeli-American ships have been targeted. So here you can see where the Hodeida port is located. This is where the strategic Al-Hodeida port is located. It is facing the Red Sea. It's on the Red Sea coast of Yemen, and it's very close to the choke point, which is Bab al-Mandeb. So that is why Hodeida has a lot of strategic and commercial significance. It was a major port for Yemen when the country was stable. But since the Houthis have taken over, they have largely controlled the Hodeida port. This is the port through which Iran has been supplying weapons to the Houthis. And Saudi Arabia has tried to take back the control when it fought a war against the Houthis a few years ago by leading a coalition of the Gulf countries against the Houthis. So Hodeida port has always been in the news. Strategically, commercially, it is very significant for the region, for Yemen. And ever since the Houthi rebellion began in 2014, since then the Hodeida port has been a flashpoint. It has been controlled by the Houthis. They have been receiving weapons from Iran through this port. Saudi Arabia has tried to take the control back when it fought a war against the Houthis. So that is why the location of this port becomes very important. So on this note, I would like to conclude my discussion for today. I hope you guys have liked the session and understood everything that we have discussed. So if you have benefited from the session, please let me know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.